I never imagined that my 20-year marriage would end in such a brutal fashion. My wife Beatrix, the woman I trusted, was cheating on me with her rich partner. I found her on a train ride, dressed like a street hooker. She didn't even notice me as I took photos, capturing her betrayal. When I got home, I confronted her and she cried in misery. But I wasn't done. I hacked their law firm systems, taking everything. Now, she regrets her choices forever. This is a story of deceit, betrayal, and ruthless revenge. It's payback time, and no one saw it coming. I was exhausted. The 12-hour flight from Tokyo was always tough, and it didn't get better as I got older. Even in a comfy first-class seat on the big 777 plane, I couldn't sleep well. I hated flying, not because I was scared, but because it was so boring, especially the long flights across the Pacific to visit customers in Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. For once, Beatrix had agreed to pick me up. She hated driving from our home in Piedmont in the East Bay to San Francisco International. I wasn't sure if she disliked me or the drive more, but our marriage was heading for trouble. In the past few years, she had become a different person. Her drinking had increased despite my pleas for her to get help. Instead of listening, she would get angry and lash out, telling me to butt out. I tried to explain that our marriage was my business, but she paid no attention. I hadn't told her why I insisted she pick me up, but she finally agreed, reminding me that the BART train home was quicker and easier. Maybe for her, but after a long trip, I'd rather sit in her big Mercedes than on a train seat. I also hoped to have her full attention and knew she wouldn't be drinking if she was driving, so at least she would be sober when our talk started. But now, it was 7:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, and I was on the first train of the day from San Francisco International. Beatrix and I had planned to meet when my flight arrived Sunday evening, but my work in Taipei wrapped up early, and I caught an earlier flight from Tokyo. I must have called Beatrix a dozen times before leaving Tokyo, but no one answered at home or on her cell. I was arriving about 12 hours early, reaching San Francisco around 6 on Sunday morning. Even if I contacted her, I doubted I could convince her to get up that early. With no answer, many thoughts ran through my mind. Had she finally left? Probably not, but if she did, would I care? Deep down, I knew I cared. We'd been married for over 20 years and had 2 wonderful kids. I'd loved her since we were kids who lived across the street from each other. We grew up together and shared many life experiences. She had also broken my heart deeply. I winced as I remembered how, during our junior year at Berkeley High, she abandoned me. I was just a math and science geek, and she had become a cool cheerleader. We both grew up a lot during the 6 years we were apart. I hated it, but I learned I could live without her. Now I was about to find out if I could do it again. Beatrix's drinking had gotten worse over the past few months, especially since our son Brady left for college. "Dad, you've got to help her. I know she's drinking a lot, but I've seen her taking all sorts of pills. I told her not to expect me back home. I love you both, but I can't handle her abuse and the way she disrespects you. I just can't." He gently scolded me for being away so much, but said he understood. "I'm worried about her, Dad. I want my mother back." I hugged Brady and promised to find a way to get her into treatment. So far, I had failed. I planned to tell her today that I was leaving her. I didn't intend to give her a choice between treatment or a divorce because I knew she would resist. No, I was just going to tell her I was done, and that whatever we had was gone. This made me very sad. Maybe once I moved out and filed for divorce, she would realize the seriousness. Alcohol was powerful, but I knew my Beatrix could beat it. I just couldn't figure out what started her down this path and why she refused help. Did she hate me that much? So there I was, going through the Sunday Chronicle almost alone in the train car at that early hour. I ignored the stops as the train moved under the city. I barely noticed the driver's announcement of Embarcadero Station when I heard the click-clack of high heels on the marble platform. I loved the sound of heels and peeked over the top of the paper as she entered the door at the other end of the car. My heart skipped and my stomach dropped when I recognized Beatrix. What was she doing getting on a train out of the city at 8 in the morning? At that moment, her clothes caught my eye. She looked like she had a rough night. She wore a sheer white sleeveless sweater without a bra. Below the sweater was a red leather skirt that barely covered the tops of her dark stockings. I could see the silver suspender clips. On her feet were incredibly high red patent leather shoes with stiletto heels. Her auburn hair was messy, and her stockings had runs. She sat with her head down, not hiding the tears on her cheeks. She shivered. I lowered my paper and looked at her carefully. She didn't notice me. My Beatrix looked like she had been through a lot. She pulled a dark leather jacket from her large leather bag and wrapped it around her shoulders. I watched her, torn. Part of me wanted to go to her and comfort her, and part of me, angry, wanted to shake her and demand answers. A horrible, sick feeling spread through my body. How long had this been happening? Did she have one boyfriend, or was she doing something even worse in hotels in San Francisco? As the train sped under San Francisco Bay, her crying got louder. She didn't try to hold back her tears. We were alone in the train car, and she still didn't see me sitting just 20 feet away. I pulled out my phone, and as we reached the West Oakland station, I took a few pictures. What had happened to her? To us? Why was she doing this? I knew I'd talk to her when we got home. I didn't know where I'd go after that, but I promised myself I'd pack my things and leave today. Drinking was one thing, but cheating, no, even worse, was too much. My heart hurt for what we had. She was throwing it all away. I felt so sad. I had 4 more stops to decide what to do. I knew it was a bad idea to confront her on the train or at the station. I might even get arrested. No, I'd follow her home and talk to her there. Now, it wasn't about threatening to leave. It was certain. We would get divorced. 8 minutes later, the driver announced, "Rockridge Station." I waited for her to get off first. She was hugging herself, crying and trembling and rocking back and forth. As the doors opened, she seemed to realize she had to get off. She moved slowly to the door. When did she get so thin? As soon as her back was to me, I grabbed my carry-on bag and left through the front door just as it started to close. I watched her walk slowly down the sunny platform with her head down. She pulled out a handkerchief and wiped her tears. My beautiful Beatrix, my wife, the woman I loved, looked as sad as anyone I had ever seen. I felt crushed. I followed her about 20 feet behind as she walked down the stairs from the platform. I doubted she would have noticed me even if I was right next to her. She fumbled in her large tote bag until she found a small purse. She got out her BART ticket and made her way through the turnstile. I followed her down the escalator and into the parking lot. She walked to her new silver Mercedes S-Class. I took photos as she opened the car, got in, and drove away. I headed across College Avenue to the other parking lot and then realized I didn't have a car at the station. My car was at the dealer for repair. They had dropped me off at the train station for my outbound flight and promised to bring it to my home after the work was done. I stood in the sun on this bright Sunday morning and looked for a taxi, but had no luck. I mentally shrugged, put the bag's strap on my shoulder, and started walking the 2 miles home. Luckily, I had dressed in comfortable clothes, a polo shirt, khaki pants, a light jacket, and comfy shoes. As I walked, I passed several benches and thought of sitting down to think. But I knew it was time to get home and face her. Waiting wouldn't make things better. After about 10 minutes, I realized the walk was probably the best thing for me. The morning air was still cool, and the sun on my face helped calm me. It also helped me release some of my anger. I knew I could never harm Beatrix. I wondered how she would react when I got home. Would there be tears and apologies, or just more anger? She seemed so sad and weak that I doubted she had the energy to fight. What would Brady and Connie say? Brady seemed to know our marriage was in trouble. Connie had been at college most of the last 4 years, but she had to notice the tension and her mother's drinking during short visits home. I didn't think she'd be surprised. After about 40 minutes, I climbed the hill to our house, the exercise warming my tired muscles. We had lived there for more than a dozen years, most of them happy. I remembered how excited Beatrix was when we decided to buy the home. It was a 2-story house with a Mediterranean style, a huge kitchen, and a large master bedroom with a big tub and a shower for 2. I thought of our first weekend in the house and how happy we were. Now, our dreams were gone. I fished my keys out of my jacket pocket. The house was silent as I walked through the main floor to the kitchen. The house was spotless, as always. Between Beatrix's need for everything to be clean and a cleaning person every week, it usually looked ready for a magazine photo shoot. Even drunk, Beatrix cleaned. I did notice a glass and empty bottle of scotch in the sink, which was unusual. I walked up the stairs, calling Beatrix's name. I didn't want to startle her, although I had no idea what condition she'd be in. I figured she might have changed her clothes, showered, and fallen asleep in our king-sized bed. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. I gently pushed open the double doors to our bedroom, softly calling her name in case she was asleep. I decided that if she was in bed, I would just leave her there and talk later. There was no sign of her, though her clothes were scattered on the floor. That was also not like Beatrix. My confused brain noticed there were no panties among the clothes. Through the bathroom door, I heard a song from Beatrix's favorite album, something by Sarah McLachlan. I found her music a bit too emotional, but Beatrix loved to listen while in her bath and in her car. I started to turn the knob when Beatrix's phone beeped with a message. The sound came from the small purse on the dresser. Then I saw the mirror and the evidence of what I guessed was cocaine. There was a small pile of it left on the mirror. I wondered if it was for after her bath. My God, Beatrix, what are you into? Next to the mirror was a plastic bag filled with white powder. It looked like a lot. Where did she get so much cocaine? It must have cost a lot of money. Was she trading favors for drugs? Oh, Beatrix. The phone beeped again. I pulled the phone from her purse and opened it. There were several missed calls, all from the same San Francisco number. I went to her voicemail and entered her password. It was always the same, our daughter's birthday. Beatrix, baby, where'd you go? We're still having a party here. Call me. The voice was a bit slurred, but it sounded familiar. I listened to the next message. Beatrix. Enough fun, baby. You need to get back here. You know the deal. No more treats, unless you play. You better come back soon. This time I recognized the voice as one of Beatrix's work partners. His name was Cole Harvey. The next message was even harsher and angrier. Beatrix. God damn it, get back here right now. We're not done playing. If you're not back here in the next 10 minutes, all the photos will go to your useless husband. You wouldn't want him to find out, would you? Anyway, you know you like it. Wait a second. Mark says he needs you back because he knows you want more. I didn't listen to the next message. I had heard enough. Beatrix had gotten involved with Cole and was using cocaine, probably given by Cole. I felt sick thinking about Mark Lamont being involved. While Cole always seemed slippery, Mark seemed like a decent family man. But now this. I leaned against the door, hearing the quiet, sad singing, and knew it was time to confront Beatrix. My hands shook with anger as I opened the door. Why? I stepped into the bathroom expecting to hear a scream of surprise or some kind of reaction from Beatrix. Instead, she was just lying there in a bubble bath, a peaceful smile on her face. An empty bottle of champagne was on its side near the tub. Nearby, on the floor, was an empty pill bottle. I went to her and shook her, furious, wanting to wake her and ask why she had done this. I wanted her to tell me. I still had her phone in my hand and I called 911. Beatrix did not respond. Suddenly, all my rage went away, replaced by fear for Beatrix. I drained the cooling water from the tub and lifted her out, wrapping her in a large towel. She was so thin I hardly recognized her. She seemed to weigh nothing as I carried her to our bed. Beatrix had always stayed in shape with diet and exercise, but she had always had womanly curves on her tall frame. Now she was ice cold as I held her close. I took her to the bed and covered her with blankets. Her pulse was very slow and her breathing was shallow. I knew I had to act fast if she stopped breathing. Please, Beatrix, please don't die. Please don't do this to us. I lay close with my arms around her, trying to give her some of my warmth. With great reluctance, I left her for a few moments to hide the bag of cocaine and open the front door. I left the rest of the cocaine on the mirror. I knew the medical people would need to know what she had taken. I looked at the pill bottle as I listened to the fast-approaching siren. The pill bottle said it should contain 20 pills, and the date on the label showed it was bought a week ago. The fear of losing Beatrix, of being without my wife, lover, and friend, turned my stomach in knots. Despite what we had been through the last couple of years, I never considered letting her die. I knew I still loved her deeply, and I wanted desperately for her to live. I also knew there would be consequences for those responsible. I heard the aid car pull up, and then doors slamming and footsteps. I called down to them. I didn't want to let her go. I feared this would be the last time I would hold her. The two young men and a kind-looking blonde woman gently took her from me, uncovered her, and stretched her out on the bed. She looked so pale and thin. She was naked, and I was embarrassed for her that these strangers would see her like that. I was also ashamed that I had failed her, failed to get help for her, and failed to notice how she had changed. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen her naked or when we last had time together. As they quickly began to work on her, a second woman appeared. She gently pulled me from the room and out into the hallway. I told her about coming home and finding her in the bath. I gave her the pill bottle and pointed through the door at the cocaine on the dresser. I also told her about the bottle of champagne in the bathroom next to the tub and the bottle in the sink downstairs. She left me there and quickly went back into the bedroom to tell the others. From that point until hours later at the hospital, everything was a blur. I remember them taking her out on a stretcher and one of the men using a bag to help her breathe. She had tubes in her and was covered with a large blanket. Somehow I was glad no one could see her naked now. There was no room for me in the aid car. I followed in her car, and by the time I parked, she was already in the emergency department. I vaguely remembered a nice young woman helping me with all the hospital and insurance forms, and then talking to a policeman. I knew that when a spouse ends up dead or in the hospital, the other spouse is always a suspect. I told him I had just gotten home from a 2-week trip to Asia and had come home to find her like this. I didn't think there was any reason to tell him about seeing her on the train. He asked if we were having problems in our marriage. I told him the truth. After a while, he left me alone. I was sure he would speak to the ER doctors before getting back to me. Somehow, I managed to call Connie and Brady. I didn't give them many details other than saying she was very sick and in the emergency room. They both promised to come soon. Mr. Marshall? The voice sounded distant as I sat in the hard waiting room chair. I didn't know how long I had been there. Eventually, I looked up and saw a young man in green scrubs. Mr. Marshall? I nodded, trying to read his face. Was he here to tell me Beatrix had died? Will you come with me, please? I stood on shaky legs as he pointed to a small office nearby. I shook my head when he offered me coffee. Mr. Marshall, your wife is out of danger. I didn't hear the rest of the sentence as I buried my face in my hands and cried. He left me alone for a few minutes. Then I felt a hand on my back. Mr. Marshall, I'm Dr. Norman. The younger man was replaced by an older one, also in green scrubs. Are you okay to talk now? I looked at him and could only nod. He handed me a glass of water. I drank it gratefully. Thank you. Mr. Marshall, I know it is very hard when a spouse tries to take their own life, but just know that she will probably make a full physical recovery. She is very thin and dehydrated. She had a lot of alcohol in her system, sleeping pills and cocaine. In a strange way, the cocaine might have saved her from the immediate effects of the pills she took. The medics did great by not waiting to pump her stomach. If you had waited maybe even 5 more minutes to call for help, she might not have made it. Can I see her? Yes, but she's still out and maybe for a few days. My whole body ached from lack of sleep, and the adrenaline rush had left me exhausted. My legs felt heavy as I made my way to the intensive care unit. I trembled as I looked at her. She was very pale, and her hair was under a surgical cap. She hardly looked like my Beatrix, my sweet love, the mother of our children, and my lifelong friend. The heart monitor showed a steady but slow beat. They told me she was on the ventilator as a precaution, and once her breathing stabilized, they'd take her off. Beatrix, please don't die, I whispered. The ICU nurse eventually asked me to leave, and I found myself in the quiet hospital cafeteria on a Sunday morning. I was exhausted, but my mind was wide awake. I needed to sleep, but it had to wait. I poured myself a cup of thick black coffee and added cream and sugar. I usually took my coffee black, but today I needed the extras. I sat in a hard cafeteria chair and thought about the years we had been together and the events that led to Beatrix's suicide attempt. Actually, it was not an attempt. I didn't know much about why people try to take their own lives, but it stuck in my mind that many who do are crying out for help. That was not the case with Beatrix. With both Brady and Connie away at school, and with me not expected back for another 12 hours, Beatrix was not crying out for help. She had been determined to end her life, knowing no one would find her until I got home that night. I shuddered at the thought of that scene. No Beatrix at the airport, me coming home and finding her dead in the bath. It was close enough as it was. What if I had decided to sit on one of those benches for even a few more minutes? I could have prevented the whole thing if I had confronted her or comforted her, letting her know things would be all right. But no, I sat and watched as she fell apart in front of me. I should have known I was seeing the woman I loved reaching the end of her rope. Now Beatrix was upstairs unconscious, and it was partly my fault. I ignored her and left her alone as her drinking got worse. Yes, she did everything she could to push me away, but I was her husband, through sickness and health. Was I waiting for her to hurt me again as she did years before? Was that why I always held back a little? Was it a defense mechanism? I did love her, and I cherished the many happy years we had together. Could we ever put our lives back together? I didn't know. I pulled myself away from these thoughts and forced myself to drink the now cold coffee. I made a decision. Now it was time to act. I had things to do, people to call, and actions to take. Actions I hoped would lead to justice for those who had hurt my Beatrix and ruined my marriage. I had maybe 4 hours before Brady and Connie arrived. I got up and looked around the empty cafeteria as I pulled out my cell phone and walked outside. It rang once, and then I heard a familiar voice. "What's up?" "I need access to a building." "Where?" "Hers." "Is she okay?" "No, but she'll recover." "What do you need?" "A prox card with a blanker and a 23. "You got it. How much time do I have?" "I'll be there in about an hour." "Okay. Stopping by a Chronicle across the street." "Thanks, I owe you." "No, you don't." "Thanks anyway." "Okay, man. I hope she gets better soon." He hung up. Our phones used encryption technology, but we still kept our conversations short. I was going to visit the law offices of Madison and Trasker. The phone call had been to a long-time friend who spent most of his life on the other side of the law. We were kind of the yin and yang of the computer security business. I had ordered a proximity badge that would get me access to Beatrix's building in San Francisco and all the offices. The badge would display my photo and look like the real deal to anyone. It also had a built-in blanker that would make the security cameras go blind for a short time as I moved through the building. Anyone watching the screens would think it was just a quick computer glitch. Typically, there's only one person working in the One Market building on Sunday mornings. Chances are, he or she wouldn't even notice the blip on the cameras, even if they happened to be near the screens. The 23 was a different story. It was a computer virus we made together. After I downloaded everything from Cole Harvey and Mark Lamont's computers, I would infect them with a nasty virus. This virus would destroy all the data beyond recovery. No one would know I was ever there. If someone tried to trace the virus, it would look like it came from a porn site outside the country. I might do the same to Beatrix's computer, depending on what I found. Heck, I might crash every server at the law firm. I turned up my collar and ran across the street from the hospital to the parking garage. I had a train to catch. I was heading back to Embarcadero Station. The morning sun had turned into dark winter clouds and heavy rain. It matched my mood. Beatrix stopped pacing and looked out at the view of San Francisco Bay from her apartment on the 20th floor. It was almost noon on a perfect summer day in the Bay Area. She watched a container ship with a small splash of water at its bow, heading toward the Golden Gate. She had seen so many ships like this over the last 6 months, always wishing she could be on one, escaping her problems and the memories that haunted her. She didn't know where the ships were going, but she knew it had to be better than her current life. Today was her last day at the Redwood, an expensive drug and alcohol rehab center in a new high-rise by the water. It had everything a 5-star hotel would have, including a top-notch restaurant, room service, a shopping arcade where you could buy fancy brands like Fendi or Prada, beautiful suites, a 24-hour concierge, and a gym and salon as good as any fancy health club. It also had a fully staffed health clinic, but you couldn't leave, even for a little while, without your doctor's okay. The Redwood was very expensive. Beatrix looked around her bright living room, her eyes landing on her reflection in the big mirror over the fireplace. She saw an attractive, tall, slim woman in her mid-40s. She wore a pricey, short-sleeve cream silk blouse and a light peach cotton skirt that came to her knees. Her tanned and toned legs, shaped through workouts, didn't need stockings. She had just bought a pair of very expensive Jimmy Choo high-heel sandals, which she wore at the moment. Her auburn hair fell loosely to her shoulders. She looked at herself, noticing her deep green eyes no longer sparkled as they used to. The sadness in them was clear. She knew she would leave without regret, even though this place had helped her sort out her life. Her life had fallen apart 7 months ago when she tried to end it. It wasn't a cry for help. She truly wanted to die. If her husband Sterling hadn't come home early that day, well, she didn't want to think about it. She had to get on with her life, a life without Sterling. She lost the only man she ever loved. No, she thought, it wasn't the suicide attempt that drove Sterling away. It was her affair with Cole Moline. It wasn't a real love affair. Cole just used her, and in return, she got drugs and the shame she seemed to seek. She stopped pacing and sat in one of the leather chairs, staring at the deep blue water, the sun shining on its almost flat surface. The ship was almost at the bridge. She shook her head slowly. The affair wasn't what ended their marriage. It was the final blow. She and Dr. Hannah had talked this over many times. Beatrix's drug and alcohol use and her refusal to listen to Sterling and her children had turned her into someone unrecognizable. Instead of the happy mom, wife, and paralegal at a top law firm, she became someone who pushed everyone away with her shouting and hurtful actions. It wasn't the affair that destroyed their marriage. It was the 2.5 years leading up to it. Her paranoia, groundless jealousy, and withholding of affection drove Sterling away. Staring at the water, Beatrix thought about her daughter, Connie, who stood by her throughout everything. Connie was away at college at UC Santa Barbara and didn't see the worst of Beatrix's downward spiral. Her son, Brady, however, spent his high school years dodging her insults and trying to avoid her drug and alcohol-fueled rages. Shortly after Brady left for college, Beatrix started her affair with Cole. Brady had left after a big argument where he finally told her off. He said he was glad to leave, and if it were up to him, he'd never return. He scolded her for how she treated his father. "Why do you think Dad is gone all the time? Do you think he has a girlfriend? You know better than that. He loves you more than you'll ever know. But what you're doing to yourself and to him is destroying your marriage. I'm glad I'm getting out now so I don't have to watch it all fall apart." His goodbye was so sad that it broke her heart. She cried for hours after he left. She was too upset to help herself. The next day at work, one of the partners, Cole Moline, noticed her mood and said he had something that might help. The cocaine did help, and all her sadness went away. Soon she was addicted, and when Cole suggested she could get more drugs by doing something for him, she agreed. They went to the hotel across the street. Cole was not caring like her Sterling. He was rough and treated her badly. She convinced herself that this was the best she ever had. This rough treatment made her feel even worse about herself. She started to believe she deserved to be treated badly. Today, Connie was coming to take her to her new home in the East Bay, in a place called El Cerrito. It was north of Berkeley, on top of a hill with a great view of San Francisco Bay. The house was on a quiet street. It cost a lot, but she had enough money from selling the family home, the settlement from the law firm, and Sterling's generous divorce settlement. She never had to worry about money again. She smiled sadly, thinking how she had never worried much about money after Sterling's business took off. She went back to work because she was bored when her kids grew up. Working as a paralegal made her feel important. She liked being part of a big law firm in San Francisco. Connie graduated last month, and Beatrix got permission from Dr. Hannah to travel to Santa Barbara for the ceremony. She knew Sterling would be there, so she tried hard to look her best. She wore a green silk blouse, a skirt to her knees, and high heels. She was happy when people still noticed her, but she felt sad when she saw the sadness in Sterling's eyes. He looked younger than his 45 years and was very fit. He was confident and successful. She felt proud to be with him and liked it when other women were jealous. But she knew it was all a lie. She was sure he didn't love her anymore. She knew they had little chance of getting back together. Sterling was too good a man and would find someone else. During her days of drugs and alcohol, she thought he was having an affair, but now she knew that was just an excuse for her own mistakes. At the graduation, she managed to keep herself together. Sterling had been kind during her recovery, but the love was gone. He had told her that her betrayal made it unlikely they would ever be together again. She had begged him for forgiveness while she was still in the hospital, but he couldn't see how it could work. She sat with a fake smile, lost in thought. When the final speaker finished, the graduates crossed the stage to get their diplomas. When Connie got hers, she held it high, and despite everything, Beatrix hugged Sterling. She felt happy as their daughter smiled. For a moment, she felt the old Sterling, but then he pulled away. She continued to smile at their daughter, even as tears fell. Maybe there was hope. After the ceremony, Beatrix and Sterling talked while they waited for Connie. Beatrix was surprised to learn that Sterling was taking flying lessons. He always wanted to be a pilot. They both felt relieved when Connie rejoined them. She was excited about graduating and starting law school in Berkeley in the fall. Beatrix was happy that Connie would be living with her for now. "I know Dad still loves you." Connie's voice faded as her mother wiped her tears. They drove silently along Highway 1, enjoying the sun and the beauty of the coast as they traveled north to San Francisco. Beatrix looked at her confident daughter, trying to imagine her in a courtroom. Connie had height from both parents and blonde hair from her father. She was a striking young woman. Despite the attention from boys, no one had ever won her heart. Maybe her parents' troubles had made her cautious. "Connie, I know. And that's what makes it so hard, seeing him. Being around him on days like today. Days that should be filled with love and joy. I see what I've done to him. Seeing him without the love that used to shine in his eyes when he looked at me. How could I be so foolish?" "You need to stop blaming yourself. Dr. Willett said you need to give it time. You and Dad both need time to heal." Beatrix was silent. She thought about how the doctor had helped her, but sometimes she still wished her attempt to end her life had worked. She could never tell Connie or Dr. Willits about that. She and Sterling did need time to heal, but what was the point? Beatrix watched the sky through the open sunroof of her daughter's BMW. "I loved seeing you both together today." There was a long silence before Connie asked, "Is he still going ahead with the divorce?" "Yes." She said it so softly that Connie could barely hear. They drove in silence for a long time after that, each lost in her own thoughts. During their last meeting just a few weeks earlier, Sterling had sat next to her on the big couch in her apartment at the Redwood as she cried. They were supposed to discuss the property settlement. She knew this was the end of their marriage. The loneliness without Sterling filled her with dread. She needed to feel his arms around her one more time, but he couldn't do it. Quietly, he said, "Beatrix, you must understand. The pain and sorrow of these last few years are so deep now. Even though I love you and miss you, or at least miss the Beatrix I married, I can't forget what you've done. You betrayed me and our family, and I won't let myself be hurt by you again. I remember your promise 23 years ago when you said you'd never hurt me again. You said I was your only love, and you were so sorry, calling yourself stupid for letting me go, saying you missed me so much. You promised." He left the apartment, but not before she saw the tears in his eyes. The doorbell brought Beatrix back to the present. It was time to start a new phase in her life. A phase without the husband she had loved for over 20 years. "Mrs. Beatrix Marshall?" Beatrix was surprised to see a tall, handsome, sandy-haired man in a gray suit at her door. "Yes." He held out an ID card and said, "I'm Special Agent Dean George, FBI. May I come in?" Beatrix looked at him for a few moments. "Yes, come in." She led him into the living room. She had already spoken to the police and attorneys about her testimony against Cole Harvey, but she thought that case was over with a plea deal. She had tried to put everything about Cole and their time together out of her mind. It wasn't really an affair. It was just a trade. Sex for drugs. It was worse than an affair. A visit from the FBI brought it all back. Her stomach knotted. "What can I do for you, Agent George?" "I'd like to ask you some questions about Cole Harvey." Beatrix felt her stomach twist even tighter just hearing the name. She quickly sat in the chair by the window, feeling weak and like she might faint. After a few moments, she looked up and said, "Oh, sorry, please sit." She pointed to the large couch that faced the bay. "Mrs. Marshall, are you all right?" Beatrix nodded. "Please just call me Beatrix. I'm no longer Mrs. Marshall." "I'm sorry to hear that. I'll try to be brief." Beatrix waited, feeling a chill. "Do you remember the last time you saw Mr. Harvey?" Beatrix went pale. She clenched her hands as she relived the nightmare of that Saturday night 7 months ago, when Cole had filled her with drugs and alcohol and brought in another man and a girl. The next morning, she fled home and tried to take her own life. In a shaky voice, she said, "A Saturday night about 7 months ago. That was the last time. It must be in the police reports." Tears filled her eyes. "You haven't seen him since?" She shook her head, studying her hands. "Beatrix, I don't know if you've heard, but Mr. Harvey disappeared a week ago. Just vanished." She looked at him and said quietly, "I'm not really surprised. Cole is an opportunist and a coward. I'm surprised he stayed around this long considering the trouble he was in." "Well, there's more to it than that. He didn't take much with him, just his car keys, wallet, and passport. Everything else is still at his place. We haven't been able to find his car either. We think he was gone about 8 hours before anyone realized. We thought he'd turn up quickly, but he's vanished. I thought he made a deal for his testimony. Maybe some people he knew got to him." George just looked at her. "Maybe? Am I a suspect? You must know our history. Up until a few weeks ago, I was going to testify against him until he made a deal. Do you think I would go after him myself because I thought his punishment wasn't enough?" Her voice rose with anger. Agent George raised his hands. "Beatrix, you are not a suspect. We know you never left the Redwood that night. We talked to security and checked the security camera videos." "And why? Why am I here?" She nodded. "It's about your husband." Her stomach twisted again. Was Sterling involved in Cole's disappearance? Had her actions pushed him to hurt Cole? "Do you know where your ex-husband was a week ago today?" No, we don't keep in touch much. He travels mostly to Asia." What Beatrix didn't tell Agent George was that exactly a week ago was the day their divorce was final. Her lawyer called her that afternoon. She went to her room, pulled the covers over her head, and cried for hours. She deeply regretted meeting Sterling before she died. "Agent George, I have to say, no matter what Cole or I did, I can't imagine Sterling had anything to do with Cole's disappearance. He's always been kind and gentle. Our actions hurt him badly, but someone who would hurt Cole, no. Beatrix, I think your ex-husband had the motive and chance to make Mr. Harvey disappear. Harvey ruined your marriage." "Let's get one thing straight, Agent George. Cole Harvey did not ruin my marriage. I did. It was all my fault. Cole was just the spark that made everything fall apart." George thought for a moment. Your ex-husband might not see it that way. She stayed silent. "Beatrix, do you know what your husband did during his 4 years in the Marines?" "No, we weren't together then. Only after—" Beatrix's voice trailed off as memories of losing and finding Sterling again made her feel sick. She had rejected him and then realized how wrong she had been. "Beatrix, in the Marines, your husband, your ex-husband, was a sniper. Records show he killed 46 men. Beatrix felt dizzy. She never knew. Sterling had changed after his service, but they never talked about it. She thought it was due to the tough nature of the military. I spoke to his former commander, and he said the real count was likely twice that. Sterling was called Ace Marshal. He never missed. He served in the worst places: Middle East, Central America, Africa, and Afghanistan. It was a tough job. But that was over 20 years ago. I know, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but he has killed, and he was very good at it." Beatrix was shocked. "Beatrix, does your husband own a gun?" She shook her head. "I've never seen Sterling with a gun. I wouldn't have allowed one in my house. Even in the Marine photos, I never saw him with a weapon." He jotted a note in a small notebook from his pocket. "You might wonder why the FBI is looking into this now. Well, the disappearance of a witness in a major international drug case interests the FBI and the U.S. Attorney for California. Documents from an anonymous informant and the search of Mr. Harvey's office and home showed he was big in the Bay Area drug scene. He got immunity for testifying against several drug dealers. Luckily, he testified before a grand jury and several indictments came out a couple of weeks ago. The ATF dropped the ball on his protection and he vanished. Most think his drug-dealing pals got to him. I'm not sure." He stared at the water below. Then, after a pause, said, "I should also tell you another partner in your firm was badly beaten that same night." "What? Who? Marcus Lamont?" More shocks came. She remembered the last night at the Hyatt vividly. Mark, A married man with 2 beautiful kids and a lovely wife had shocked her. He admitted he'd wanted her for years and aimed to give her a night to remember. She was ashamed now, even with the drugs and alcohol clouding her mind, that she told him how wonderful he felt. Is he dead? No, but he may never walk normally again. They beat him badly with a pipe. He had many fractures, including both kneecaps. His attacker knew what they were doing, just enough to hurt him, but not to kill. Mark said he never saw who it was, thought it was a cruel mugger, and wasn't very cooperative. Beatrix was stunned. Beatrix, I put puzzles together. I follow the money or the motives. I think Marcus was involved in some way. He was a friend of Mr. Harvey before he married and worked in your firm. The hospital found cocaine in his body that night. You are the link, and we know Sterling knew about you and Cole. Beatrix looked at him, overwhelmed. She admitted she was oddly pleased Cole was likely dead and Marcus might never walk again. But Sterling, as the Avenger? Hard to grasp. Plus, how would Sterling know Mark was involved that night? She had told no one. She was too ashamed. Do you want to tell me about him? Agent George, everything came out in the police investigation. That's all I have to say. Everything had come out in the police investigation. A tip had come in anonymously, telling the police that Cole was dealing drugs and that Beatrix was somehow mixed up in it. When the police visited her in the hospital, Sterling was there with her. After they left, Beatrix told Sterling everything and begged him to forgive her. She knew her suicide attempt and Sterling finding her had hurt him deeply. His reaction of anger and sadness burnt her like hot steam. From that moment, he never touched or held her, no matter how much she needed him. But how could Sterling know about Mark? Was it just a random robbery? No, that was too big a coincidence. What else did Sterling know? She was struggling to hold back her nausea. Agent George was sitting there watching her quietly. I'm sorry. I really don't think I can help you. She said this while shivering. Oh, don't worry. I'll keep trying. It's what I do. He stood up. By the way, have you ever heard of someone named Jagger? Or has your husband ever mentioned that name? No, I don't think so. Why? But he ignored her question. How about Eric Douglas? She knew that name. She hadn't heard it since high school. The only Eric Douglas I know or remember was my husband's best friend in high school. But that was a long time ago. That Eric Douglas is wanted in several countries for many computer crimes. He has robbed banks by finding security holes in their systems and has stolen millions from people, companies, and governments all over the world. He sees himself as a Robin Hood and goes by the name Jagger. We think many of his victims never report the thefts because they involve illegal money or goods. We believe he and your husband have stayed in touch and help each other. Agent George, I'm sure you're wrong. I haven't seen or heard of Eric Douglas since high school, and I'm certain Sterling hasn't either. They were friends back then, but how do you connect them now? Mrs. Marshall, you may not recall, but your husband didn't attend his high school graduation. A memory hit Beatrix hard. She did remember. She saw herself in the auditorium with a gift for him in her lap and an empty chair next to her where Sterling should have been. He was arrested the week before graduation along with his friend Eric Douglas. What? They were brilliant with computers even then. They got into several scientific and government computer systems through the new setup at UC Berkeley. Security was almost non-existent back then, and they built their own hacker devices. Eric made bail, and the charges were later dropped. They were only charged with misdemeanor trespassing. Beatrix couldn't speak. She was shocked. Your ex-husband made a mistake by refusing bail. He spoke to his parents, but still refused bail. He asked the judge to let him join the Marines. The prosecutor dropped the charges, and the recruiter took him in. It seemed like he just wanted to escape. Eric Douglas later went to Cal Poly, studied math and engineering, and got a job with a small company in Silicon Valley that designed security software. He worked there for about 6 years, then quit and disappeared. Beatrix, can you guess the name of the company? She knew the answer. Zenith, she said quietly. Yes. He and your husband worked at Zenith together for at least 2 years after Sterling graduated from Cal Poly. How do you think Sterling got that job? He asked pointedly. We think Eric, a.k.a. Jagger, is living in the Bay Area now. Why are you telling me this? Your husband is not who you think he is. I believe he is involved in Cole Harvey's disappearance and the attack on Marcus Lamont. I don't know what to say, Agent George. I never knew Eric and Sterling worked together or anything about what Sterling did in the Marines, but I'm certain Sterling had nothing to do with Cole Moline going missing or Mark Lamonte getting hurt. Even to her, her words sounded unsure. Beatrix, the night Mr. Harvey went missing, the security cameras in his building malfunctioned. Lobby cameras, elevator cameras, and the camera outside his door stopped working for about 5 minutes at 10:02 p.m. Shortly after, cameras in the west stairwell and at the base of those stairs also stopped. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere in Mr. Harvey's building or condo. Our IT guys tell me they've heard rumors that some of our federal agencies have devices that can cause this. Beatrix saw where George was going. Special Agent George, my husband is a respected businessman and non-violent. Just because he knows about computers and security software and was once friends with Eric Douglas doesn't mean he is involved more than I am. It could just be a computer glitch. George just looked at her, unconvinced. Beatrix walked him to the door, holding his card. Thank you, Beatrix, for talking to me. I hope you enjoy your new home in El Cerrito. Best of luck. She closed the door and stood there for a long time. She had not mentioned her move to El Cerrito. Special Agent George was thorough. More importantly, was Sterling a murderer? Was he a computer criminal? After 23 years of marriage, she started to see him differently. If he did these things, was it because he cared for her? Or was it just revenge on the men who hurt her? Did he want to hurt her too? How could he hurt her more than he already had? She shook her head to push away those thoughts. She looked in the mirror again. She saw a very sad woman with makeup ruined by tears. No, Sterling loved her too much to hurt her physically. His revenge was his absence and her knowing she would never feel his arms around her again. In despair, she sat on the couch and stared at the blue water of the bay without really seeing it. Oh, Sterling, what have I done? What have I done? I've been such a fool. I love you. She sat and cried again, recounting memories. What a wonderful surprise. Thank you, Connie. Beatrix hugged her daughter while looking around her living room. Connie had unpacked many of her things and made the house livable. There were fresh flowers in vases in the living room and on the dining table. The large sofa was placed just as Beatrix had imagined, facing San Francisco Bay and the Golden Gate Bridge. The view was amazing, stretching from the Richmond Bridge to downtown San Francisco. Beatrix loved the peace of this place and believed it would help her heal. She still had weekly appointments with Dr. Hannah, but thought the worst was over. She knew the worst of her illness and battle with alcohol and drugs was behind her, but life without Sterling was just beginning, and that was the hardest part. She never thought things could get so bad that Sterling would leave her. She should have known better since it had happened once before. Back then, just like now, she had taken him and his love for granted, and her foolish actions had driven him away. She was very grateful Connie would live with her while attending law school. Connie, her eldest, was always the calm and logical one. She accepted people for who they were. Beatrix tried to make peace with Brady, but he was stubborn like his father and struggled to move past the harm she had caused. Even though he knew his mother had been suffering from addiction and depression, it was hard for him to accept. With Dr. Willett's help, Brady was slowly coming to understand that her treatment of him was because of her illness, not a lack of love. He rightly blamed her for the breakup of the marriage due to her horrible treatment of his father. Beatrix could only respond with regret and apologies. He was still cautious, but she felt confident he would eventually welcome the return of his loving and caring mother. Ready for lunch? Beatrix turned to see Connie setting plates of sandwiches on the dining table. It was a step up from the living room and next to the kitchen. Both rooms shared the same view of San Francisco Bay. They ate and drank their tea in silence for several minutes, each lost in thought. So what now? What now? What? Beatrix smiled at her daughter, knowing she was asking about her plans. She was not going back to Madison and Trasker. That was a given once Cole Harvey was arrested and the police, ATF, and IRS raided the firm. It barely survived after paying fines and settling suits brought by Beatrix and other victims of Cole and others. Much smaller now, the firm moved from its expensive downtown office to a smaller one in Oakland. Beatrix knew she had to go back to work to keep her sanity. I'm starting back to work next week. You know a girl has to pay the rent? Now it was Connie's turn to smile. I knew you wouldn't be able to just sit here and watch the view, but I thought you might take a little time. Connie, I've been cooped up in the redwood for too long. I need to get out and do something. Beatrix frowned as she realized this was the time she had thought about for years, the time when the kids were out of the house, and she and Sterling, with enough money, could travel to those places she had dreamed about. Now she was going to work to pass the time and keep her mind off Sterling's absence. Connie poured tea as they finished lunch and settled on the big sofa. So what's the job? It's a paralegal job with a woman who runs her own practice. She used to work for one of the big firms in town. She had an affair with one of the young partners, and her marriage fell apart. Beatrix wiped a tear with the back of her hand and tried to smile. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Connie held her hand, worried by the sudden sadness in her mother's eyes. Mother, just wish there was something I could do. Beatrix grabbed a tissue from the coffee table and dabbed her eyes, trying to smile again. Anyway, her name's Celia Kennedy. Her office is in the 100 Stewart building. It's right behind One Market where I used to work. There's a coffee cart on the corner out front. It's where I always go for my morning chai. Beatrix smiled sadly. Nice that I don't have to look for a good chai. Anyway, Celia just moved into the building. She was up on Geary Street but needed more room because her practice is growing. She decided she could use a paralegal. I don't know how she found out about me, but she called me one day at the Redwood. Then she came to visit. We've had lunch a couple of times, and I really like her. Her ex, also named Sterling, used to be a big shot in mergers and acquisitions here. But after their marriage fell apart, he left. He worked overseas for some big shipping company for a few years, and now he runs the biggest private investigation firm in the Bay Area. She paused and wiped away some tears. With his new wife. Mom, you can't really think Dad's like that. And anyway, he still loves you. I know he's not seeing anyone else. He travels, and when he comes back, he just stays in his condo. Don't you think there might be a chance? Beatrix looked down, more tears falling. I hurt him so much. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me. Connie saw how sad her mother was. He's hurting. But I can't believe he wouldn't realize one day that you two belong together. Connie, I never told you this, but I broke up with your dad in high school. I was dumb and I pushed him away. He did forgive me years later, but I promised him I would never hurt him again. But I did, didn't I? She said as the tears kept coming. What? Mom, Brady and I know the story. Grandma and Grandpa Williams told it 100 times. You and Dad lived across the street from each other, friends since you were little, walking to school together, getting married after Dad got out of the Marines. What happened? Connie was shocked to see her mother hang her head and shake it slowly. Beatrix's eyes were shiny with tears when she looked at her daughter. That's the cleaned-up version. We started together and ended up married, but I almost lost your father because I didn't value his love. I was immature and foolish. Surprised, Connie just watched her grieving mother. Beatrix stopped and took a deep breath. It started at the end of our sophomore year in high school. That spring, I got picked for the pep squad. I had wanted to be a cheerleader for years, and suddenly my dream came true. Your father and I weren't technically dating. We were just always together. We went places, hung out, we were a couple. We walked to school every day. Connie smiled, imagining her parents as teenagers. We were just a couple weeks from the end of school when I found out about the pep squad. I was thrilled, and I told your father. I kept talking about how excited I was as we walked home from school. I admit I was a little let down by his reaction. He was my best friend, and I wanted him to be excited too, but he seemed, well, I didn't know what. Like an idiot, I thought he was jealous. I don't know why I thought that. Your father always seemed comfortable with himself. Beatrix looked off at the distant water, gathering her thoughts. Even then, he was tall but skinny. I guess you'd call him a math and science geek. He was brilliant in school. I had to work hard for my math and science grades, and I was glad for his help. But he was never a show-off. Connie poured more tea as she listened to her mother. Things were kind of strained between us for the next couple of weeks. Maybe not for your father. He either didn't notice or pretended not to. Things got better as summer started, and then it was time for our annual trip to Tahoe. You know your grandparents had been friends for a long time, and every year we went to the lake for almost 2 weeks. It was wonderful. They always rented a couple of cabins and a ski boat, and we spent our time outside water skiing or walking in the woods or looking at the stars. Beatrix sat back, reliving the memories of that summer at the lake. Toward the end of the first week, your dad and I were lying on the pontoon on the lake, watching the stars come out, and all of a sudden we were kissing. We had never kissed before, and I had never kissed a boy before. I was sure your father hadn't kissed a girl. I discovered he was a wonderful kisser. Beatrix paused and sipped her tea, her eyes glowing. We lay there for a long time, holding hands, staring at the stars. I remember feeling a warm breeze across the lake. Then he said something strange. "You won't forget me, will you?" I rolled over, looked at him in the darkness, and told him he had been my best friend all my life. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "I don't ever want us to be apart, and with your schedule next year." I pressed myself closer and told him I'd never forget him, and I didn't ever want us to be apart. The rest of the time at the lake was magical. I know our parents noticed the change in us. There wasn't the usual teasing. We had become a couple. Oh, we never went further than kissing and holding hands, but there seemed to be all the time in the world for more. Beatrix stared at the view of the city across the bay, collecting her thoughts. It was too bad I didn't listen to him. She paused again. A few weeks later, everything changed when cheer camp began. Suddenly I was caught up in my new life as a cheerleader, and I hardly had time for your father. Before I knew it, school was starting. For the first time in my life, I missed the Marshall's Labor Day cookout. I had been invited to a pool party hosted by the head cheerleader, Emily Spencer. Her parents were out of town, and there was lots of beer and a crowd of older boys. I loved the attention and the feeling that I was part of this new group, the in crowd. Beatrix was part of the popular group at Berkeley High. My mom had mentioned that my dad had visited a few times, but I didn't even bother to call him back. Then it was the first day of school. Beatrix got up and stood by the glass doors looking out at the water. How could I have been so dumb? Dumb. She walked back and sat down again. He found me in the crowded hall between classes. I was with some other cheerleaders, and we were in our uniforms for the pep rally that day. He said something about stopping by my house that morning and my mom telling him I had already left. I felt embarrassed that a math nerd was talking to me in front of my new friends, and I told him I had taken a ride with Sally. Beatrix stopped to wipe her tears. He knew from my voice that we would not be walking to school together anymore. I turned and walked away with the other girls. The worst was when one of them called him a geek, loud enough for everyone to hear. I am ashamed to say I laughed with them. I saw him less and less during our junior year. We had no classes together, and he didn't come to the games or other events. She paused again, thinking about those days over 20 years ago. That Christmas, for the first time, your dad didn't come to my parents' Christmas party and open house. I was dating a football player at the time and didn't think much of it until I was helping my mom clean up after the party. I asked her if she liked Bennett, and she gave me a look that said, "You can't be serious." Bennett was a football player and, well, it should have been your dad. To him, I was just another girl. I didn't know better. I was stupid. She shook her head. Then your grandma said she hadn't seen your father that day or much since the summer. Mom just let the thought hang there. I tried to say I was sure he was busy. Actually, I had no idea why he hadn't come. His parents were there, but I didn't talk to them. I started to feel uneasy. I couldn't remember the last time your dad and I had spoken. Unfortunately, I soon forgot about the conversation with Grandma and the party. Connie hugged her mom as Beatrix continued. Soon it was summer again, and one day I was with another cheerleader named Sophie. We went to the local pool to pick up her little brother. When we walked in, I was shocked to see your father. He was a lifeguard and swim instructor, and he looked amazing. He had grown taller, and his skin was tanned from the sun. He wore a white tank top and blue swim shorts. I walked up to him and asked how he was, and Sophie gave me a look like, "You know this guy and you haven't introduced me?" I introduced them, and her interest was so obvious it was embarrassing. As we stood there talking, a beautiful blonde girl came up and put her arm through his. She was very pretty, tall and slim, wearing a small yellow bikini. Beatrix looked at her daughter, feeling comforted by her concern. I realized I knew her. She was the sister of our cheerleader captain, Emily. Her name was Beverly, and she was going to be a junior in the fall. I saw how your dad looked at her, and then it hit me. He used to look at me that way. I went home and cried for days. I had been dumb, and now he was gone. All the fun and excitement of being a cheerleader left me. I stayed with it, of course. There was no turning back. When school started in the fall, I saw them together everywhere, at social events, games, holding hands in the hall. My social life dried up. I realized how much I loved your father, but I had taken him for granted. Beatrix stopped her story and said, "Kind of like I did this time." Connie hugged her mother, stunned by the story. She realized how painful it was for her mom and understood why she had never heard it before. "But he must have loved you. You ended up with him. You must have done something right." Connie watched tears fall as she waited for her mother to respond. "I remember your dad's parents coming to the Christmas party that year. I learned that he was spending the holidays with Beverly and her family at a ski resort in Canada. I had bought your dad a leather journal to give him at the party. I don't know why I thought he would come. I had a miserable Christmas. Your grandma was very understanding and helped me through it. She told me some things are meant to be and others aren't. She's a smart woman and basically told me to move on with my life." Connie was speechless. It was hard for her to imagine what it must have been like for both of them in high school. When school started again in January, everything was different. There was no sign of Beverly, and your father was not around much. There were terrible rumors that he had hurt Beverly while they were in Canada, and that he had to go back to Canada to face charges. A friend who worked in the vice principal's office confirmed that the vice principal had spoken with the police in Canada. We found out that Beverly transferred to another school, and your dad was taking mostly independent studies that kept him away from school. Connie stared at her mother. She hardly knew how to respond. She couldn't imagine her father doing anything like that, much less being accused of such a thing. "Mom, what did you think?" With red eyes, she looked up at her daughter. "I was so confused. I didn't know what to think. I thought I knew your father and his kindness, but the rumors wouldn't go away. One day I even asked Emily, but she said she couldn't talk about it because there was an investigation. As we got closer to graduation, your father was never seen. But the rule was that if you wanted to graduate, you had to show up for the ceremony. I knew he had to be there. I even brought the journal I had bought him for Christmas, but he didn't show up that night, and he didn't come to the graduation either." Beatrix wiped her tears and then continued. "There was a big party at Emily's house after graduation. I wasn't seeing anyone at the time, so I thought I'd just stop by. I had a couple of beers and went upstairs to use the bathroom because there was a line downstairs. When I left the bathroom, I passed Beverly's room. The door was slightly open, and she was there with her sister. They were sitting on the bed and talking, and I stopped to listen. I don't know why. Emily was trying to get her to join the party. I heard Beverly say she couldn't and that she wasn't in the mood to be around a bunch of drunk friends. Emily told her to snap out of it and said she couldn't lock herself away forever because of some jerk who wasn't even good enough for her. I didn't know what I was hearing, but I had a feeling it was about your father. Then I was surprised when Beverly defended him. Beverly told her sister not to call him names and said it was her fault, all her fault. She cried as she said it. Emily yelled at her to stop crying and said he should have been more understanding. She said she hated him and he was a jerk. I was confused as I listened. I thought I should leave, but then Beverly sobbed and said he was kind and wonderful and he loved her. She said she betrayed him and he was so angry that she just wanted to die. Emily said she didn't care what she did to your dad. She just knew he hurt her little sister and she made him pay. Beverly asked Emily what she did, and Emily said she fixed him by starting rumors all over the school that he was a monster and that he hurt her while they were in Canada over Christmas. Beverly fell on the bed sobbing and saying no, no, no. Then Emily said she even got the vice principal to call the police. Beverly looked at her sister, tears rolling down her face, and went pale when Emily said she got their father to help too. Emily said she found out from Cherie in the guidance office where your father, who she called that jerk, applied for college, and Daddy made some phone calls. She told Beverly that he found out Stanford, Caltech, and Berkeley were no longer interested in him as a student. Emily sat next to her sister with a face glowing with pride while Beverly just lay on the bed, hugging herself and crying. "Connie, that's how I learned that the rumors about your dad were all lies. I never found out what caused his breakup with Beverly, but she must have hurt him badly. Something happened in Canada that killed his love for her, and he wanted nothing more to do with her. She still loved him, which was clear from what I saw. I was so upset that I left the party and never spoke to Emily again. My God, Mother, how horrible for Dad. He must have heard the rumors, but he still loved her enough not to defend himself. Or maybe he was so hurt by her that he just didn't care, Beatrix replied. Did you go to Dad and tell him what you heard? No, I didn't see your dad until he came back from the Marines over 4 years later. I would have thought you'd want to tell him. I did, but when I went to his house the next day, everyone was gone. His parents had moved to South Carolina. I asked my mother about it, and she said she had told me some weeks before that they were leaving and how sad she was that her best friends were moving across the country. Obviously, I was so wrapped up in myself that I hadn't heard her or ignored her. Not uncommon for a teenage girl. She looked at Connie, trying to smile. I didn't know your dad was even in the Marines until some time later. I think it was a letter Mom got from the Marshals. At that point, I think I just gave up on ever being with your father again. For a long time, I thought about him every day, but finally I started dating again while I was at Cal. So, what happened? What happened? It was Connie's turn to attempt a smile. Yes. How did you and Dad get back together? Obviously you did. She watched her mother's gaze turn back to the water. Connie, enough of this for now. I'm tired out. I think I'll go lie down for a bit. The twist of fate. Mom, you're not really going to wear that on your dinner tonight, are you? Beverly sat at her vanity, dressed only in a blue robe, and smiled in the mirror at her 16-year-old daughter, Charlotte. First of all, it's not a date. It's just dinner with a friend. And secondly, what's wrong with what I'm going to wear? Charlotte pointed at the blouse and skirt on the bed. That's what you wear to work every day. The only thing missing is your lab coat. Charlotte walked into her mother's closet and began looking through the hanging clothes. Beverly could hear hangers sliding on the closet rails. Charlotte called out from the closet. So this friend from work, is he another researcher? Beverly knew Charlotte was very curious since Beverly rarely went out. In the 2 years since Davis had passed away, Beverly had focused on their daughter and her work. Davis had been a wonderful husband and father, and they both missed him a lot. No, he owns the computer company that's improving all our systems. From the closet, Charlotte asked, So he's some computer nerd? Beverly smiled, thinking about Sterling Marshall. Sterling was not a nerd. He was tall, handsome, and soft-spoken, but when he talked, people listened. He had a way of commanding attention. Suddenly, she felt her face warm up as she remembered how it felt being close to Sterling back in high school. She had been deeply in love with him. Sterling was a caring boyfriend and made her feel special. Beverly was glad her daughter couldn't see her blushing. Charlotte was very observant. And to be honest, since Davis died, Beverly felt the old feelings for Sterling coming back. It wasn't that she didn't miss her late husband. He had loved her so much. But working closely with Sterling for long days sometimes made her fall for him again. Sterling had been her first love, and their breakup devastated her. She felt like she couldn't breathe for months after. Even when she switched schools, she was unhappy. She found out later that her sister had plotted against Sterling, and it broke her heart all over again. Sterling had disappeared after school and no one knew where he went. Then one day, more than 4 years later, he walked into her lab at Berkeley. Mom, are you listening? Did you hear what I said? While Beverly was lost in thought, Charlotte had come out of her closet holding a stylish little black dress and matching high heels, shoes Beverly hadn't worn in a long time. The dress was classic, sleeveless, with thin straps, and a bit shorter than Beverly felt comfortable wearing now. Not that she couldn't pull it off. She had bought it for their anniversary dinner, but then Davis got diagnosed with spinal cord cancer that week. Had it really been 4 years ago? Beverly smiled and shook her head. I don't think so. It's much too... Too what? Charlotte asked. Sexy? Holding the dress in front of herself, she wondered if she could borrow it for the junior prom. And don't even think about borrowing it. Beverly laughed. Charlotte's face turned red, knowing her mother had guessed her thoughts. Changing topics, Charlotte asked, So what do you know about this guy? Well, he owns his own company, he's smart, Has a son at Stanford, a daughter in law school at Berkeley, and, well, he's good-looking." "Oh, how good-looking," Charlotte teased. "Very. Now can we change the subject?" "Only if you'll tell me how you met." Beverly turned to face her daughter, thinking about what to say. She and Sterling had been working together for almost 3 years, and the computer upgrade project was almost done. She felt a bit sad about that. Seeing Sterling made her day, and she would miss their quick lunch breaks, even if they were in a busy meeting room. Being around him made her happy. During Davis's final year, as his condition worsened, she relied on Sterling more as a friend. He was someone she could trust, without worrying about rumors spreading at the medical center. On the day of Davis's funeral, Sterling came to both the service and the burial. She saw him among the mourners, standing a little behind her, but they never got a chance to talk. His presence comforted her. As she walked away from the grave on that windy San Francisco day and saw him head to his car, she finally admitted to herself that she had strong feelings for him. Was she fooling herself? Were these feelings just memories of their passionate past, or was it something new? Was she just confused and looking for comfort? Did he feel more than friendship for her? While they worked together before Davis's death, he had only shown friendship. Sterling was married, but Beverly knew little about his marriage. Sterling spoke proudly of his son and daughter, but rarely mentioned his wife. "Hello, Mother. Are you still with me?" "Oh, sorry, I've known Sterling since high school." Charlotte looked at her, sensing more. "He was my first boyfriend." Saying those words brought such sadness, and Beverly had a hard time holding back tears. She grabbed a tissue and dabbed her eyes, watching her daughter's expression change from teasing to caring. Charlotte put the dress on the bed and came over to hug her mother. "He must have hurt you badly." Beverly didn't know what to say as the tears came. She couldn't believe the pain she felt from the memory of Sterling walking away from her in the park on that rainy January day so many years ago. It felt as fresh and painful as when it first happened. After a few minutes, Beverly calmed down. Charlotte moved back to the bed and sat facing her. She felt very protective of her mother and couldn't understand why she'd want to see a man who had hurt her so much, even if it was a long time ago. Beverly blew her nose and looked at Charlotte. She felt she had to explain and said, "He was the love of my life, my first love. He was a senior and I was a junior. We met at the Berkeley pool during summer. He was a lifeguard." She smiled a little, thinking about meeting the shy lifeguard with intense gray eyes. "So, he hurt you and then broke your heart, right?" Charlotte asked. Her voice made it clear what she thought of him. Beverly held back more tears with a lot of effort. "No. He loved me with all his heart. But I did something very stupid and hurt him so much that he couldn't stand the sight of me." Beverly hung her head and the tears came again. Charlotte was confused. Her mother was the perfect example of a professional woman. She had raced through college in 3 years, top of her class, got into medical school at 21, married her mentor Davis Powell, and spent her years solving tough diseases. How did this superwoman make a mistake that caused her such sorrow many years later? "I'm sorry, Charlotte. I don't know what came over me. The memory of the day we broke up just washed over me." She smiled a bit and said, "I thought I'd forgotten all about that. I'm being silly." She got up and joined her daughter, who was still sitting on the bed. She took her hands and said, "Sometimes memories that have been locked away decide to pop out at unexpected moments." Charlotte hugged her. Beverly knew she had lied to her daughter. Being around Sterling, especially after Davis died, reminded her daily of her stupidity. Even though she tried to think of it as a mistake made by a teen, the sadness was still there. Finally, Beverly said, "Guess I'd better get back to getting ready." Charlotte stood and picked up the black dress. "This is it. You're going to show this guy that he shouldn't have left you all those years ago." She grinned and nodded her head. Beverly looked at her, then at the dress. "You're right. Tonight it will be eat your heart out, Sterling Marshall." Charlotte smirked and put the dress back on the bed. The mood had lightened. "He's coming here?" Beverly nodded. "Well then, I'll be interested in meeting this guy, especially if he's good-looking. Now, are we talking about very good-looking or just okay for an older man?" Beverly made a face at her daughter. "Get out of here and let me finish getting ready." "On second thought, Mom, maybe you should just go with the skirt and blouse." Charlotte laughed. Go! Yes, Mother, she said in a fake, polite voice. Out! As she left, smiling, she said, I'll listen for the door. As Beverly stepped into the shower, she reminded herself that this date happened because she had asked Sterling out. She had watched him stay to himself after his divorce and decided it was time for him to move on with his life, and she wanted to help him do that. She wanted to see him outside of work so she could look into the feelings she had for him since Davis died. Actually, she knew her feelings. She just didn't know how Sterling felt about their relationship. She wanted more than friendship. Beverly did wish Sterling had felt close enough to her to share what happened in his marriage. She knew some details, like that his wife had betrayed him. She remembered the day she first heard about trouble with Sterling's wife. What was her name? Oh yes, Beatrix. About a year ago, he had come to the medical center for a meeting and looked terrible. She called him aside during a break. Sterling, are you okay? She smiled and said, I'm your friend, so I can tell you that you look awful. Are you feeling all right? I'm sorry, Beverly. Just some family health problems kept me busy all weekend. Is everyone okay? She asked, truly concerned. He looked at her, sadness in his eyes making her want to cry. My wife. She's in the hospital. Sterling, why are you here? You should go. This meeting can run without you. She glanced into the conference room where all the tech people were deep in work. It didn't really matter if Sterling was there or not. She's unconscious and I couldn't just sit there and go crazy. Anyway, my daughter is with her right now. I'll check back tonight. Beverly took his arm and guided him to her office. They sat on the couch. Can you talk about it? He sighed heavily. Beatrix tried to end her life. Beverly was shocked and had to fight the urge to get all the medical details. She said, Oh dear, I'm so sorry. Will she be okay? She's out of danger. Beverly didn't ask for more, but after a minute he said, I got home from Taipei on Sunday morning and I found her. Beverly put her arms around Sterling and held him for several minutes. Sterling never gave more details except updates on Beatrix's condition when she asked. Not long after she left the hospital, he announced he had moved out and was divorcing her. Beverly was puzzled. She couldn't imagine Sterling leaving a wife of over 20 years just like that. She wondered if she had misjudged him. No, she decided, Beatrix must have done something very bad for Sterling to leave after her hospitalization. On her own, she pieced together the story. When Beverly heard that the law firm Madison and Trasker was getting smaller and moving to Oakland, she called a female friend who worked there as a lawyer. She knew Sterling's wife used to work at the firm. Her friend answered the call. Beverly, things have been crazy here for months. I'm leaving because this place is really bad now. One of our paralegals tried to end her own life, and she was using cocaine that one of our senior guys gave her. The DEA got an anonymous tip and raided the office. They found lots of drugs in the guy's desk. Strangely, his computer was wiped clean, and even the DEA couldn't get anything off of it. We think someone warned him. Maybe that's why he didn't hide the drugs in time. It's really confusing. Beverly asked, Did you know Beatrix Marshall? Her friend sounded cautious. Why are you asking? Beverly paused. I'm a friend of Beatrix's husband. Why don't you just ask him? No, I can't do that. There was a brief silence before her friend spoke again. Okay, Beverly. I heard that some senior guys were giving cocaine to assistants in exchange for, being friendly. Beatrix Marshall was involved too. There were lawsuits, firings, and many lawyers left the firm. Thanks. I owe you one. Her friend laughed. You couldn't afford me, but send some business my way. I'll be at Lloyd & Johnson. Now Beverly knew what had broken up Sterling's marriage. It made her sad. What had made Beatrix trade something so important for drugs? Beverly knew they had 2 kids and enough money. Was Sterling such a bad husband that Beatrix turned to drugs and tried to harm herself? Beverly couldn't believe it. Beverly had known Beatrix from high school. Not well, but Beatrix and her older sister Emily were on the pep squad together, so there was some contact. She didn't see Beatrix again until about 3 years ago, soon after Sterling got a big contract to update the computer systems at the medical center. They met at a charity event for the medical center, which was also honoring Davis, a mutual friend who was fighting cancer. Davis was there in a wheelchair, and the cancer was spreading quickly. At the event, Beverly and Davis ended up seated with Sterling and Beatrix. Even though it had been years, Beverly and Beatrix recognized each other. The event was too loud for much conversation, but Beverly noticed a distance between Sterling and Beatrix. Beatrix was still very attractive and looked about the same as in high school. Beverly also saw Beatrix drinking a lot of wine. That night, Davis gave a touching speech, making jokes and thanking his staff. Many people had tears in their eyes by the time he finished. When the night was almost over, only Beverly, Davis, Sterling, and Beatrix were left at the table. Sterling was trying to get Beatrix to dance, but she wasn't interested. Davis turned to Sterling and asked, "Sterling, could you do me a favor? Beverly loves to dance, but I can't because I'm in this chair. Could you dance with her for me?" Sterling smiled and stood up. "I'd be happy to." Beatrix glared at Sterling and grabbed the last bottle of wine on the table. Beverly remembered that dance like it was yesterday. She wondered why Beatrix didn't want to dance with Sterling. When Sterling took her in his arms, she forgot about everything else. The wine she drank made her feel relaxed, and she enjoyed the dance fully. Sterling was a great dancer, leading her smoothly around the dance floor. It felt like he could guide her with just a slight touch. The dance was amazing, but it ended too soon. When they returned to the table, Beatrix looked extremely angry. Thinking about that night, Beverly wondered if that dance had set Beatrix on her path of drugs. Was Beatrix jealous and insecure because Sterling worked with Beverly every day? Beverly and Beatrix had been rivals years ago, but Beatrix ended up with Sterling. Why would she feel threatened? Beverly tried to push the memories away, but they flooded back. She was 16 again, in love for the first time, enjoying a beautiful summer in Northern California. Those days with Sterling were magical. He had opened up to her after his previous girlfriend Beatrix had broken up with him. At the time, Beverly couldn't understand why, but she was glad for the chance to be with him. Beverly vaguely knew who Beatrix was. Late in the summer, just before school started, she saw Beatrix at the Berkeley pool where Sterling was the lifeguard. Beverly got a lot of joy walking up to Sterling and linking her arm with his. Beatrix looked shocked. It was funny because Beatrix seemed to want to be with Sterling, but he wasn't interested. He didn't say anything, but his cool attitude showed it. Beatrix had left him for the exciting life of a cheerleader. She found out he wasn't going to wait for her. Beverly never told Sterling how happy she was to see his ex-girlfriend get a reality check. When Beverly showered before her date with Sterling, she knew it was a small win. After all, who ended up married to Sterling? Beatrix, the ex-girlfriend. Life played a mean trick on Beverly and Sterling, and they broke up because of her mistakes. She had hurt the man she loved, and it took her a long time to get over it. In fact, after Davis's death, she still wondered, what if? The summer Sterling came back from 4 years in the Marines, Beverly was 21 and doing a research internship with Dr. Davis Powell, who she greatly admired. She was a recent college graduate waiting to start medical school in the fall and had won one of Davis's summer internships. Davis was charming and driven and about 10 years older. His proposal took her by surprise. Beverly often thought if Sterling had come back just a few weeks earlier, would her life have been different? When he did show up by chance in her lab on his first day back, she was stunned. She was alone in the lab, carefully setting down a beaker, and ran to him, throwing her arms around him. They hugged like old friends, their troubled past behind them. Both had grown a lot over the years. During the few weeks he was on campus, they had several lunches together. Davis was always too busy for lunch, so it was a nice change for Beverly. They talked a little about where he had been the past 4 years, but mostly about the future. Sterling was excited to start school at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, where he hoped to design and build new computers. Beverly was excited about starting medical school. Somehow, her engagement to Davis felt less exciting. It almost seemed like a smart business decision. Over the years, their love grew, and with the birth of their daughter Charlotte, they became even closer. Davis was a great man, husband, and father, and losing him was a hard blow. From the beginning, she made it clear to Sterling that she was engaged, and there was no future for them. If Sterling was hurt, he hid it well. But considering how she had hurt him in the past, it wasn't surprising. She and Sterling promised to stay friends and write each other, but with medical school and his college, letters became fewer. The last note she got from him was a week before her wedding, congratulating her. This made her very sad, but it was too late to change things. Not long after, she heard from a friend that Sterling had married Beatrix, the ex-girlfriend Beverly had seen that summer at the Berkeley pool. She wondered what brought them back together. Everything could have been different if she hadn't pushed Sterling away with her silly act of rebellion at the Whistler ski resort near Vancouver, Canada, over Christmas vacation. She and Sterling had been seeing each other for almost 6 months. Her parents liked Sterling, but they thought she was too young to get serious. But Beverly felt she had found her lifelong partner and wouldn't listen to her parents. She convinced them to invite Sterling on their annual ski trip and was thrilled when they agreed. That year, they were going to the Whistler resort. Beverly was bursting with excitement. She imagined skiing every day on perfect snow and cozy nights with Sterling. They flew to Vancouver on Christmas Day. When they picked up Sterling, her dream started to fall apart. He brought his snowboard, not skis. He explained he could rent skis and teach her snowboarding, but this wasn't what Beverly had imagined. She was upset during the flight. Her period had started a few days before, which didn't help. Then, a blizzard hit, stopping all outdoor activities. On top of that, her parents booked a 2-bedroom suite, so she shared a room with her sister Emily, while Sterling's room was at the other end of the lodge. There was no way she could spend the nights with Sterling. Her mood darkened. Despite the bad weather, she did get some quiet time with Sterling. They spent time by the huge fireplace in the big hall, reading and sitting close. They enjoyed feeling each other's warmth. They ate every meal together. She was annoyed because they couldn't have private time due to the sleeping setup and the constant presence of her family. 2 days after Christmas, the weather turned clear and cold. It was perfect for skiing. She and Sterling got to the slopes early and skied until lunch. During lunch, a group of snowboarders joined their table and talked to Sterling about snowboarding that afternoon. They left, hoping to see him later. This bothered her, especially since one of the snowboarders, a young woman who looked very goth, seemed interested in Sterling. "Did you promise to go snowboarding with them this afternoon?" she asked, annoyed. Sterling looked guilty. "We talked about it yesterday. I was going to mention it. I thought it might be fun for you to try it too." "When were you going to tell me?" Sterling looked at her apologetically. "I'm sorry. We can just ski this afternoon and snowboard another day." But Beverly wasn't in the mood to be calmed. She made a mistake that would cost her Sterling's love. "It doesn't really matter. I'm kind of tired. You go ahead." "You sure?" he asked. She wanted to yell at him for not seeing she was upset, but instead she shrugged and said, "It's fine." She watched him leave to get his snowboard, feeling more upset. "This trip just keeps getting better and better," she muttered. Back in her empty room, Beverly convinced herself that Sterling didn't really love her and only went snowboarding to be with the goth woman. She paced around, angry. Finally, she lay down and fell asleep. Her mother woke her later, asking if she wanted to join them for dinner. Beverly said she had a headache and would pass. Where was Sterling? It was dark and the snow was falling hard. "Probably with that goth girl," she fumed. Feeling bored and upset, she checked the minibar for some chocolate. As she took a Cadbury bar, she saw a small bottle of Bailey's Irish Cream. It had a chocolate flavor, and one little bottle wouldn't hurt, right? She drank it quickly, feeling warmed as she ate the chocolate. She turned on the TV and changed channels aimlessly. By 6, with still no sign of Sterling, she found a small bottle of Drambuie. It was sweet and strong. She didn't usually drink much, just a sip of beer or a glass of wine at home on special occasions. Next, Beverly noticed a half bottle of red wine. She thought about the hot tub where she and Sterling had spent the last 2 evenings. Maybe he was there with his snowboarding buddies. She decided to check. She changed into her smallest bikini, put on a hotel robe, and grabbed the half bottle of white wine. She giggled at how unsteady she felt as she walked down the hallway. In the atrium, near a large pool, the snow outside made everything look beautiful. Instead of Sterling and his friends, she found a mixed group of older Canadian kids. They called her over, inviting her to join them in the hot tub. She ended up sitting between a muscular boy and a red-haired girl. Everyone had been drinking. When Beverly sat, they squeezed against her. Beverly started to relax and felt hands touching her legs. A hand brushed against her chest, and she realized her bikini top had come undone. She opened her eyes and saw only her two companions close by. She tried to protest, but instead, the girl kissed her. Beverly had never been kissed by a girl before and found it strange but also kind of nice. Soon, she felt her bikini bottoms being lowered. Even though she wanted to protest, the mix of alcohol and strange feelings stopped her from saying anything. Beverly moaned as the girl next to her kissed her neck. She felt weird when a hand guided hers towards the boy. Just then, she heard a shocked voice. "Jesus, Beverly, what are you doing?" It was Sterling, standing there with an angry and hurt look. He reached down and pulled her arm as she tried to cover herself. Still groggy, she hardly resisted. But then, as if in slow motion, she saw the boy throw a punch at Sterling, hitting him in the face and making him fall, crashing his head against the tiled wall. Beverly screamed, "No, no, no!" She tried to get to him, struggling with her bikini and finding her top. Sterling, bleeding from a cut above his eye and looking dazed, pulled himself up and walked away without a word. "Sterling! Sterling!" she yelled, but he didn't look back. She pulled up her bikini bottoms with shaking hands and grabbed her top off the floor. She didn't bother to put it back on. She was too upset to tie it anyway. Beverly covered herself with the hotel's robe and left the room quickly. She felt ashamed and scared. Instead of going to Sterling to help and apologize, she ran back to her own room. She thought everything would be better in the morning. But by then it was too late. She barely slept, worried about what she could say to him. Early the next morning, she went to Sterling's room. Only the maid was there, and Sterling and his things were gone. Panicked, Beverly asked at the front desk. The clerk looked through his papers and said, "Mr. Marshall checked out just before midnight. Where could he have gone?" A snowstorm hit hard overnight, and none of the night staff remembered if a taxi had been called or what happened to the tall young American with a bandage on his eye. By noon, Beverly, still in a panic, told her parents about the fight with Sterling and that he had left the hotel. Her parents immediately called the marshals to see if he had contacted them. He had not, and by the end of the day, everyone was very worried. Beverly feared the worst, that Sterling was lying dead in a snowbank. They were all relieved when a hotel worker said that a snowplow driver had picked up Sterling near the hotel and given him a ride down the mountain. Sadly, the driver didn't know where Sterling went after being dropped off at the main highway around 3 in the morning. The family left the next day still worried and filed a report with a very kind police officer. Beverly couldn't stop crying since she found out Sterling had gone. Every minute she was awake, and even in her restless sleep, she kept seeing the look on his bleeding face as he realized she had betrayed him. 4 days later, the California Highway Patrol found Sterling and took him to his parents' home. He had been picked up at a rest stop on Interstate 5 in Northern California near Red Bluff. He had hitchhiked from Canada and sold his snowboard for money to buy food. Sterling's mother spoke to him on Beverly's behalf, and Sterling agreed to see her. 2 days after the new year began, Beverly waited in a small park near the high school, feeling miserable. She hardly slept or ate for days and was so full of guilt that she didn't know how much longer she could bear it. When Sterling arrived, there was no smile or reassuring hug. The pain in his eyes mirrored her own. She winced when she saw the big purple bruise on his cheek and the stitches over his right eye. The bruise went almost to his hairline. She motioned for him to sit next to her, but he just shook his head and stood in front of her, wearing an old coat and jeans with rain dripping from his wet hair. "Sterling, I'm sorry. Sorry," she sobbed. He said nothing, just shrugged slightly. "I know I can't take it back or pretend it never happened, but I need to tell you I was drunk." His expression didn't change. "I was stupid and jealous. Jealous of that girl, and I was mad, so I started drinking. I went to the hot tub to see if you were there. I should have left, but I got in and... Beverly put her head down and cried, the tears mixing with the rain on her face. After a while, she looked up. The hurt in his eyes showed how deeply she had hurt him. "I'm sorry. So sorry. Will you ever forgive me?" Before he could answer, she blurted, "I just want us to be together again." For a second, he seemed surprised at what she said. He smiled, but it was a sad smile that broke her heart. At that moment, she knew she had lost him. It felt like a cold hand had grabbed her heart. Finally, Sterling spoke. "I'm sorry too, Beverly. I thought we had something special. I was wrong." She flinched as if struck by his words. "We need some time apart." Some time to deal with what happened and move on with our lives. I loved you with all my heart and probably always will, but I'm tired of loving and being hurt. I don't think I can take that chance again." She couldn't speak because her throat was tight with emotion. "Goodbye, Beverly. I hope you find love and happiness." He turned and walked away, and she finally found her voice. "Sterling, I'll love you forever," she called out. He stopped and turned. Love never lasts. Those were the last words she heard from Sterling until he came back from the Marines over 4 years later. Beverly shook herself, the memories suddenly sharp. Working with Sterling over the last 3 years made her face those memories. Now, she was going out on a date with him, a date she had asked for. Sterling had been hurt badly by the 2 women he loved the most. Why would he want to start a relationship with her again? Sterling was handsome, smart, and a kind person. Many women with no history with Sterling, would be happy to spend their lives making him happy. She saw how the women at the medical center flocked around him. Beverly finished getting ready but felt insecure. Looking at herself in the mirror, even in her black dress and heels, she only saw a wife, a mother, and a scientist, not a beautiful blonde woman. What could she offer him? She felt so vulnerable. What if he only wanted to be friends? Beverly knew that was not what she wanted. She wanted to spend her life with him and have him love her. It's the same thing younger Beverly wanted. Beverly also knew Sterling would be a wonderful stepfather for Charlotte and care for her like his own child. She felt overwhelmed. She couldn't solve this like a science problem. There was no book to explain love. But fate gave her a chance to win Sterling. She finished her makeup, grabbed her purse, and went to the living room. She was determined to show Sterling how much she loved him and that love does last. Just then, she heard the doorbell. Her heart skipped a beat. I watched the tops of the clouds turn orange and pink as the sun rose behind the Gulfstream G650 jet. We were flying high, above 50,000 feet. I looked away from the window and smiled at the sleeping figure next to me. She was wrapped up in the blankets, and I could only see her shape. I didn't need to see her to know she was beautiful and loved me. I was a lucky man. The new Gulfstream jet belonged to Mr. Lee Cheng, a rich man and loyal client. She and I were the only passengers, and we were flying to Singapore where Lee would meet us and his new jet. When Lee heard I was headed his way, he kindly offered us a ride. The jet had flown from Savannah, Georgia, and picked us up in San Francisco. It could fly nonstop to Singapore and had all the fancy features and a crew of 4. This trip was partly for business, but mainly it was our honeymoon. It was a new start for us. From Singapore, we would go to Australia and New Zealand for a month, then head back across the Pacific Ocean, stopping in Fiji, Tahiti, and Hawaii. I just wanted to make her as happy as she made me. It had been almost 2 years since I came home from a trip to Taipei and found out my ex-wife was struggling with alcohol and drug addiction. She had even thought about ending her life. Her drinking and mental health issues led her to fall for a bad person at her job. During those days, my life and Beatrix's life was a mess, and I was on an emotional roller coaster. I felt anger and love towards Beatrix and guilt for not helping her sooner. She had refused all my efforts to get her to seek help. When our marriage began to fail, the lack of love and growing hostility made things worse. I thought I was smart, but a failing relationship can break you down. You either stop caring or lie to yourself, hoping the person you loved will come back. That didn't happen with Beatrix. I knew something was wrong, but didn't understand how serious her depression was. She turned to alcohol, drugs, and other dangerous behaviors, which I never expected. After we split up, I found out that Beatrix had been jealous of my work with Beverly Powell. She remembered that I had loved Beverly years before and thought we were having an affair. Beatrix got better physically, but her mental recovery took longer. I made sure she got the best medical help and paid for her stay at the Redwood Rehab. But I couldn't bring myself to follow her therapist's advice fully. I could barely stand being in the same room with her. Had I not seen her self-destructive behavior and the drugs, I might have been able to support her more during her therapy. But those memories stayed with me, and the pain she caused made it hard to face her. Her actions felt like the abandonment I feared ever since she left me for what seemed like a pointless adventure in high school. During Beatrix's struggles, I became a tough man again. My marriage and raising our kids had softened me, but the hardness from my Marine days was always there. I had learned to be a soldier and was good at it. A therapist once told me my problem wasn't enjoying it, but feeling nothing at all. The old saying in the Marines, "The only thing I feel when I fire a shot is the recoil," fit me well. It was my job, and I did it well. So I had someone deal with Cole Harvey for hurting my wife and had Mark Lamont warned. Mark was lucky because he had a family. That rainy Sunday, while Beatrix was out cold, I sneaked into her law firm's San Francisco office. With advanced tools from Eric, I moved around unseen and found a stash of illegal drugs in Cole's office. I also found pictures on his computer that he used to blackmail Beatrix and other people at the firm, including many young women. He was really a horrible man, and the world got better without him. His computer showed me how deep the corruption was in the firm. I downloaded all his files and then destroyed his computer with a very bad virus. Another smaller virus shut down the office network, but I got what I needed before it did. The law firm couldn't use their computers for a couple of weeks, which hurt their business a lot. It helps to have friends in both high and low places. My anonymous tip was quickly backed up by Beatrix and some young victims, and search warrants were quickly issued. A lot of cocaine was found in Cole's office. This led to finding out about his deals with drug gangs and caused trouble for the law firm. Many workers were ready to testify about drug use and trading drugs for other favors, making it clear the firm wouldn't survive in its current form. I was a suspect, not the main suspect, but still a suspect when Cole disappeared. Many people wanted him gone because of his grand jury testimony and worries about what else he might reveal. Many bad people wanted him to vanish. I wanted to handle it myself, but Steve talked me out of it. When Cole went missing, I was on a plane to Seoul. I joked to myself that parts of his body might now be part of a construction site. More likely, he was dumped far out in the Pacific Ocean. Yes, the world was better off without him. Special Agent George from the FBI still thought I was the main suspect, even though I had a solid alibi. When we first met, he showed up at my door just to talk. I told him I hardly knew Harvey, but I wouldn't be sad if he and his firm were all gone. In the next interview at the FBI office, I brought my lawyer. George had requested all my financial records, probably to see if I had paid a hitman. I also knew the IRS would get involved, and I could expect many audits. It was a small price to pay for revenge, but I still hired Beatrix's new boss, Celia Kennedy. Celia was in her 40s, very tough, and a hard defense attorney. She made it clear to the FBI that I had given a statement and all my records, and unless they were going to charge me, they should stop bothering me. I liked her. I also liked that she never asked about my connection with Beatrix. I knew Celia's ex, Sterling Kennedy. He was a client. I had worked on a contract for his private investigation firm. It wasn't a big job, but it was important. Sterling's business partner was his new wife, and they had started a new family. Our kids brought Beatrix and me back together after our divorce was final. We had to meet for events like Connie's college graduation. Then there were dinners when Brady was home from school. Most times he would stay with me in my San Francisco condo, and since Beatrix worked nearby, it made sense to invite her for dinner. Connie would come over from Berkeley, too. We would sit at an outdoor table at a restaurant along the Embarcadero. Sometimes we'd walk along the Embarcadero after dinner, and I'd have Beatrix and Connie with me. We looked like a happy family. These dinners became a weekly thing, and I found myself looking forward to them. Over the months, Brady started warming up to his mother. He didn't know about the drugs and other details. He thought it was just mental illness. Their relationship got better over a year or so. At first, he was scared she might go back to how she was in high school, but soon things were normal. With him in college, he was focused on other things. I knew he didn't get why I wasn't trying to get us back together. He thought, after all the hurt, it would take longer, but that I would eventually come around. With our daughter Connie, I never knew what Beatrix told her about our breakup. Connie lived with her mom in El Cerrito while in law school. When we met, she would just ask how I was doing and not bring up getting back together with Beatrix. I think she knew the truth, but she wanted it to happen. It seemed like, in time, Beatrix and I would reconcile. The bad memories were fading, and Beatrix made it clear that if we got back together, things would be different, and she wouldn't lose sight of our relationship again. One perfect evening, the four of us were at an outdoor cafe. Connie and I shared a bottle of wine. Brady had some too, took sips from his sister's glass. He felt relaxed with the evening sun on the bay and a light breeze. Beatrix wasn't drinking, but she was relaxed and seemed happy. Connie asked, "Dad, Mom once said you two split up in high school but got back together in college. She didn't tell me how you got back together." Connie suddenly looked embarrassed, maybe thinking she had touched on a sensitive topic. Beatrix looked sad for a moment. Before I could answer, she said, "We didn't split up. I broke up with your dad because I thought cheerleading was more important. When I realized I was wrong, he had moved on and then joined the Marines for 4 years." Brady paid attention. Like Connie, he only knew the simple story of us growing up together, falling in love, and getting married when I was in college. He exclaimed, "So what happened?" Beatrix smiled, but her eyes were sad. "I was very determined. When I found out your dad was going to Cal Poly after I graduated from Cal, I applied for a job at Poly and got one in the admissions office." I smiled and took over the story. "I remember the first day I saw your mom at Poly. It was a beautiful late summer day. I stood in long lines for class assignments and student IDs, feeling old for a freshman at almost 23. Today, I'm sure all those things are done online, maybe even through a Cal Poly app on your phone." I laughed. My time in the Marines didn't help my social skills, plus, I really hated standing in lines after that. They all laughed, having heard my story of the drill instructor who told a new private that he knew the private hated him and would probably come to spit on his grave one day. The private replied, "One thing I learned in 12 weeks in the Marines is I hate standing in lines." So, I mostly kept to myself and watched the young students around me act silly. "It wasn't that bad. Even nerds have fun sometimes," Beatrix added. Everyone laughed, knowing Cal Poly's reputation as a school for smart kids. As I was saying, instead of having fun with everyone, I just watched and felt old, wondering how I would fit in. I was surprised when I got to the end of one long line and saw your mom sitting at the registration table. She was helping out, and while I was getting something important taken care of that day, she asked me out. And the rest is history. "Actually, I think it was your parking permit," Beatrix replied with a straight face. "See, I told you it was important." I winked at Connie and Brady, who chuckled. This kind of good-natured teasing was typical of our evenings. But Beatrix and I never went out alone. We just settled into family life when the kids were around. Many times, Brady and Connie left us alone after dinner, and I walked Beatrix to the BART station. I was sure she wanted me to ask her out, but she was too unsure to ask me. We had come a long way since our days at Cal Poly, but I was confused. I loved 2 women. Over the past 3 years, I had worked with Beverly Powell. During that time, both of us went through tough times that brought us closer together. As my marriage fell apart, even before Beatrix tried to take her life, I found myself drawn to Beverly. Beatrix's worry that working with Beverly might rekindle old feelings was right, but it was Beatrix who made it possible. I was afraid to say anything to Beverly, not wanting to risk our friendship. As the project at the medical center ended, the thought of not seeing Beverly almost every day was unbearable. As a single guy, I was in a rut. I worked and then went home to my condo. I saw Beatrix and the kids almost every week and found I enjoyed those times more and more as memories faded and habits from 20 years came back. Was that enough? Most days I felt torn apart. I wanted my family back together and missed the loving wife I had for those years, but I also felt a strong pull towards Beverly, who had also suffered her own losses. Beverly's warm smile, natural beauty, quick wit, and intelligence still attracted me. Yes, she had hurt me, but that was long ago and best forgotten. Looking back, I saw that we were 2 teens who were a good match but immature. We didn't communicate well and had different expectations on that Canada trip. The result was a disaster. She got drunk and was taken advantage of by 2 older teens. I overreacted, and what should have been a minor argument turned into a breakup. My pride and foolishness caused me to lose her. During my time in the Marines, as I learned the patience needed for a sniper, I had a lot of time to think about those times with Beverly. As I grew older, my anger at her turned into anger at myself. Many times I thought of writing to her, but I was convinced I had hurt her so badly that she would never want to see me again. When I came back from the Marines and met her by chance at Berkeley, she hugged me and cried, but it was too late. Those few weeks at the end of that summer, when the soft light of summer in Northern California made everything seem unreal, those were the days I remembered with Beverly. I could not tell her then that I still loved her. We had a picnic on campus, sitting in the shade of the trees on the lawns. She didn't know much about my time in the Marines because I only shared the funny moments and the silly parts of military life. After a few weeks, I wished her well, let her go, and began my new life as a student at Cal Poly. Was I on the rebound when Beatrix suddenly came back into my life at school? Maybe, but we already had a connection. Back then, I was wise enough to understand that living with regret over memories of Beverly wouldn't help when I had Beatrix who loved me. She made it clear she had made a mistake all those years ago. Our bond grew stronger, and my love for her came back. Now, we share memories and the joy of raising 2 children and many happy years of marriage. Could I let Beverly go again? Should I? Were happy memories and raising children enough to fix a marriage that had been broken? Did I want to risk it with Beatrix? These questions and my guilt over not stopping Beatrix from her self-destructive path troubled me. Then one day, during one of our last meetings at the medical center after the project was finished, Beverly asked me to dinner. I was nervous. Did she know how I felt? Did she feel the same way? We had gone through a lot together, working side by side for almost 3 years. We had designed, installed, tested, and applied the project together, overcoming many obstacles. I arrived at her home in the Palisades with flowers, not sure what would happen. Her daughter, Charlotte, who looked so much like her mother at 16, gave me a smile. Then Beverly appeared, wearing a black dress, looking stunning. When I opened the car door for her, I could smell her perfume. She said, "I hope this evening includes dancing." As the sun filled the cabin of the Gulf Stream, I turned from the window and saw her watching me, her hair messy and her eyes sleepy. I leaned over and kissed her. She smiled and whispered, "I love you, Sterling, and I will forever." As she stretched her arms to me, I let her hold me and replied, "I love you too, Beverly." Hey, audience! If you like this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.